the middle of a brutal blizzard, when the cold can kill in a matter of hours, a mother Labrador stands shivering at the door of a remote cabin, clutching her 3 puppies to her chest for warmth. How far has she traveled? How did she end up in this exact place? And most importantly, what is she running from? When Ryan Holt, a former FBI agent, opened the door, he had no idea that the decision would change his life forever. Because the mother Labrador was not a stray. She had a past, a dark past that someone out there didn't want her to escape. But when a predator showed up, claiming what he thought was rightfully his, Ryan knew he couldn't let that happen. This was no longer a story about a dog seeking shelter. This was a battle between predator and protector. Before we continue, comment where in the world are you watching this video from. And if you believe in touching stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel now, because tomorrow there will be a special story for you. A snowstorm swept through a small Alaskan town, engulfing everything in a blanket of white. The wind howled through the trees, lashing against the windows, creating eerie sounds in the darkness. The harsh cold seeped through every crack in the door, like a warning that this was not a night for the living. Inside an isolated cabin in the woods, Ryan Holt, a retired FBI agent, sat by the fireplace, his eyes silently following the flickering flames. It had been 3 years since he left his old life, choosing to live isolated from the world after a haunting past. The days of facing crime and the life and death decisions he had made all eroded his soul, pushing him to this loneliness. But tonight, what broke the silence was not a haunting memory, but a strange sound. Ryan squinted, listening. The sound of wind? No. A faint scratching sound, soft, but desperate. He put down his coffee and stood up. Again, the scratching, then a small whimper, carried away by the wind, but still enough to make him feel that something was wrong. His heart beat faster as he moved toward the door. In such a brutal storm, what could survive? Ryan pulled the door open, and immediately a blast of icy wind rushed in, cutting into his flesh like a knife. But it wasn't the cold that froze him for a moment, but the sight before him. A pale yellow Labrador, shivering, her body thin and exhausted, stood on the steps. She didn't move, just stood there, her dark eyes staring straight at him, fearful, but also filled with a silent plea. Then Ryan looked down. Pressed against their mother's body were 3 small puppies, almost buried under the snow. Their breathing was weak, each shiver signaling that death was near. A shiver ran down Ryan's spine. He had seen many cruel sights in his life, but never had an image touched his heart like this. How had she gotten her children here? From the depths of the forest to this place were miles of snow-covered roads, cold enough to kill a human in a matter of hours. How far had she run? What had she endured to find this shelter? Ryan felt his palms tighten. His instincts told him that this was more than just a stray dog. This was a survivor, a warrior. But then another thought struck him. Why had she come here? A desperate animal would seek shelter at any place, but she had come to this cabin, to his door, standing still in the storm, as if she knew there was a human there who would help her. Ryan took a deep breath. This was not an easy choice. He had opened his door to too many things in his life, and not all had ended well. He had trusted, he had helped, but the world had only returned scars, losses that could not be filled. Now, he was faced with another decision. Opening the door meant letting them in, letting chaos into his already complicated life. But if he did nothing, they would die. The storm continued to roar. The wind whipped the eaves. The snow continued to fall harder. Ryan leaned down, his eyes meeting the mother dog's deep, pained ones. There was no fear, no wariness, just quiet waiting. It was as if she had given it all to him. He clenched his jaw. A decision was made. Ryan opened the door wide. At that moment, the mother dog collapsed, barely able to stand. But before she fell, he knelt to catch her. The puppies whimpered weakly as the warmth from inside the cabin touched their cold bodies. Ryan had no idea that this decision would not only change their lives, but his own forever. The warmth of the cabin spread, chasing away the chill of the storm outside. The fire in the fireplace flickered, its orange glow reflecting off the mother dog's dark eyes. She lay curled on the blanket Ryan had spread out, her breathing ragged, her chest rising and falling in a weak rhythm. Ryan sat a few feet away from her, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. He didn't need veterinary experience to know she'd endured something terrible. She wasn't a stray, not a simple wild animal. She'd run away. But from what? Ryan had seen strays roaming the town, looking for food. They were filthy but didn't feel like this. Fear was embedded in Luna's every move, her every wary glance. She didn't trust humans. Even though she was so tired, even though he was the only one helping her, she still growled whenever he got too close. But it wasn't aggression. Ryan recognized it immediately. It was fear that had been ingrained in the mind, an unconscious reflex of an animal that had been treated so cruelly for so long that it no longer believed in kindness. He sighed, opened a can of meat, and set it down, then stepped back. "You don't believe me, I understand," he said, his voice low but not threatening. "But you need to eat." Luna didn't move. She just looked at him, then back at the food. A second, 2 seconds. Finally, instinct overcame her fear. She leaned down and took a hesitant lick. Ryan didn't move. He just watched. And when she finished, he nodded. A start. Ryan had named her Luna. But then, as he looked closer, his eyes fell on the marks on her body. Things he hadn't noticed while she was shivering in the blizzard. Her pale blonde fur wasn't just caked with mud. It had scratches, some new, some old. Her toenails were frayed, showing signs of rough trimming. And most importantly, on her neck, beneath the thick fur, there was a faint mark. A mark from a leash. Ryan felt his chest tighten. An abandoned dog wouldn't have a mark like this. He knew all too well what had made that mark. And in that moment he realized she hadn't just escaped a storm. She had escaped somewhere bad. Ryan looked out the window silently. Snow was still falling outside, covering the forest in a blanket of white. But now, it wasn't the only thing that sent a chill down his spine. Someone out there had done this to her. And someone might be looking for her. The fateful test. The next morning, Ryan wrapped Luna and the 3 puppies in a blanket and carefully placed them in the truck. She didn't protest. She was too exhausted to be afraid. Or perhaps some part of her understood that he meant no harm. Driving in the harsh Alaskan weather was never easy, but Ryan didn't care. He needed answers. The veterinarian, Dr. Caldwell, an older man with keen eyes, studied Luna for a long moment before sighing quietly. "Where did you find her?" he asked, running his hand down Luna's thin back. Ryan told him what had happened. Dr. Caldwell didn't respond right away. He continued to examine every detail. Ribs sticking out through the thin fur, old marks on the neck, damaged toenails. Finally, he looked up. She's not a stray. Ryan felt his heart sink. I know. She's been chained for a long time, the doctor continued, his voice slow but serious. Probably in a small cage, or a wire cage, where she couldn't move much, causing her toenails to wear down like this. Ryan clenched his fists. Dr. Caldwell looked at him, his gaze sharper. I don't think she's a stray, Ryan. I think she ran away. A shiver ran down his spine. Run away from where? The doctor mused. Maybe from an illegal breeding farm. Maybe from an animal abuser. But one thing I'm sure of. He paused, looking deep into Ryan's eyes. Someone out there is still looking for her. At that moment, everything inside Ryan froze. He wasn't one to believe in fate, but there was something about this that didn't feel like a coincidence. He hadn't found Luna. She'd come to him. It was as if she knew he was the only one who could help her. Ryan gripped the steering wheel as he left the clinic. He didn't say a word the entire way back to the cabin, but his mind kept repeating the same question. If Luna escaped, is someone hunting her? If so, do they know she's here? Ryan glanced into the rearview mirror. The snow-covered road behind him was empty. But why did he get the feeling? They knew? The sun sets early in the Alaskan winter, plunging everything into darkness by dusk. After their trip to the vet, Ryan and Luna returned to the cabin. But the atmosphere between them has changed. Something is wrong. Luna is no longer shivering from the cold. She's tense in a different way. Ears pricked up, eyes scanning the room, as if every wall, every chair might harbor a threat. Ryan is used to this feeling, the premonition of someone who's been on the edge of death too many times. He checks the windows again, locks all the doors, and keeps his shotgun within reach. Just in case. But against what? Part of him wants to believe there's no one out there. But the other part, the part that survived the most dangerous missions, knows that the feeling of being watched is never random. And Luna feels it too. She's been scared. But tonight she wasn't afraid. She was alert. Ryan sat down in the chair, watching Luna silently. She was standing near the door, her chest heaving, her breaths long and deep, as if she were trying to suppress a reflex that had been ingrained in her over the years. He had seen this before. Victims who had escaped from hell. They didn't immediately realize they were safe. They didn't immediately relax. They were always afraid that the person who had hurt them would return. The only question was, would he come back? Outside, the snowstorm had finally stopped. An eerie silence fell over the forest, broken only by the wind rustling through the trees, a silent warning. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. He stood up, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain aside. And that was when he saw it. A figure, standing still at the edge of the woods. Not moving, not speaking, just standing there, staring straight at the cabin. Ryan felt his heart skip a beat. Instantly, he drew his gun, gripping the stick with both hands. Beside him, Luna growled. But this time, it wasn't fear. This was a real threat. Ryan clenched his fists. The figure didn't do anything, didn't move, didn't run. He just stood there, staring straight at them. As if he wanted to send a message. As if he knew Ryan was looking at him, but wasn't afraid. Beside Ryan, Luna froze. He looked down at her, and in that moment, he realized something even more terrifying than the man outside. Luna recognized him. There was no doubt about it. She wasn't just reacting on instinct. She knew who the man was. A surge of adrenaline shot through Ryan. He opened the window, shotgun still in hand. The blizzard might be over, but the darkness outside was still a dangerous abyss. "Who could he be, Luna?" Ryan whispered, his eyes never leaving the dark silhouette at the edge of the woods. Luna growled harder, but just as Ryan was about to step out, the man turned and walked away. Not running, not rushing, just disappearing into the night, as if he had never existed. Ryan stood still, gun still clutched in his hand. The feeling of being watched clung to him. He wasn't afraid. He knew he had been found. So why didn't he run? Why did he want Ryan to see him there? Why did he want Luna to see him? Ryan quietly closed the window, turning back to look at the pale Labrador still standing in the darkness, eyes fixed on the spot where the man had disappeared. He knelt down, placing his hand on her head. "We've got trouble, haven't we?" Luna didn't respond. She had known that for a long time. Early the next morning, the pale Alaskan sunlight filtered through the trees, illuminating the snow that bore the footprints of the man who had stood out in the woods the night before. Ryan woke up, his mind still haunted by the image of that man. Who was he? What did he want? He walked down to the kitchen, checking the shotgun that was still on the table. His instincts were never wrong. There was something much darker behind this Labrador. Luna was still lying near the fireplace, her 3 puppies clinging to her. But when Ryan stepped closer, she was not asleep. She was waiting, as if she knew something was about to happen. Bam! The knock on the door was like thunder. Ryan immediately reached for his gun. No one was coming to his house. No one was knocking at this time. He walked to the door, took a deep breath, and unlatched it. The door swung open, and there he was, the man from the shadows. He was tall, his face angular, his eyes cold. A thick, heavy rope dangled from his hand, an unspoken declaration. "I came to get my dog back." Ryan didn't respond right away. Every nerve in his body tightened. He stood there, dangerously calm. Not in a hurry, not angry, as if he was used to taking what he thought was his. Ryan glanced around quickly. No cars, no sign of anyone else. But a man like this never traveled alone. Ryan tightened his grip on the shotgun, leaving no room for error. "If that's your dog, why did she run away from you?" he asked, his voice low but sharp as a knife. The man narrowed his eyes, a small smile tugging at his lips. "She belongs to me, and I didn't ask you." There was nothing on his face that showed remorse or concern, only possession. At that moment, a growl sounded from behind. Luna. She stepped forward, no longer the animal shivering in the storm. Her fur stood on end, her teeth bared, her eyes burned with a look Ryan had never seen before. She was no longer afraid. She was ready to fight. Ryan didn't need to look at Luna to know she recognized him. The man who had imprisoned her, the man who had worn her down, pushed her to the brink of death. And now he was back to claim her again. Ryan raised his gun, his voice cold as ice. "This dog isn't going anywhere." The man watched silently. For a moment, Ryan realized he was calculating. He wasn't afraid. He was used to threats, to taking what he wanted. But this time, he didn't meet a scared dog. Luna stood in front of Ryan, ready to protect what was hers. The man tilted his head slightly, a strange amusement in his eyes. Then he chuckled. "You just made a big mistake." Then he turned and walked away, not in a hurry, not angry, because he knew the fight wasn't over. As he disappeared into the woods, Ryan didn't relax. He waited, listening for every sound, checking every direction, but there was nothing. There was only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. Ryan locked the door and checked his gun. Every sense in him was tense like a string. He knew the type of man he was. He didn't give up that easily, but he also knew when to retreat. For now. Luna stood near the door, her eyes fixed on the dark forest outside. Ryan knelt down, placing his hands on her head. He'll be back. He said it, not as a question, but as a truth they both knew. Luna didn't respond, but she wasn't shaking anymore. She wasn't afraid anymore. That night, Ryan sat by the fire, the gun still within reach. But this time, he wasn't alone with his empty thoughts. Luna lay right next to him, her 3 puppies sleeping peacefully under their mother's warm fur. Ryan looked down at her, then at the fire. He never thought he'd be someone's protector again, but fate didn't ask his opinion. Luna had found him, and now they belonged together. Outside, the night forest was quiet, but not entirely peaceful. Somewhere in the darkness, a predator is still waiting. But he is no longer facing a weak dog. He is no longer facing a man who has given up. He is facing a family that will not let anyone tear them apart again. And the battle has only just begun. Thank you for taking the time to follow this emotional story. Every moment of Luna and Ryan's journey is a testament to an important lesson. Love and courage can heal the deepest wounds, helping us find a true home, a place where we are loved and protected. This story is not just about the survival of a dog and puppies. It is a story about healing, overcoming adversity, and finding strength in the darkest moments. Luna proves that no matter how harsh life can be, we can still rise and find faith and a real family. Each story and each lesson carries within it a powerful message of love, hope, and resilience. We hope this story has touched your heart as it has touched ours by sharing it. If this story has touched your heart, please like to spread the message of courage, loyalty, and unconditional love. If you believe there is someone out there who needs to hear this story, please share. It might be a light for someone who is lost. And before you go, let us know. How would you rate this story from 0 to 10? And don't forget, the story doesn't end here. Is the man in the dark gone? What will Luna and Ryan face next? If you want to discover more emotional stories like this, hit subscribe and get ready for the surprises ahead. A door has opened, and the journey has only just begun.